This Mercedes has a ton of idle vibration, as you can see right now. So today we're going to be showing you how to track down an idle vibration and solve for it with some of the best practices that you can use on your Mercedes-Benz. So for today's specific example, we have a rear-wheel drive manual transmission M272 powered car. That being said, everything from there is going to be pretty much broad spectrum. You're going to look for this in pretty much any Mercedes-Benz in general, and then at the end we'll get into some of the more specific ones that might apply on a case-by-case basis. So I'm going to get the engine cover off and we will go from there. All right, so we now have the cover off of our M272, and one of the first places we're going to look is actually where pretty much everyone's going to look anytime they're getting a vibration. That's going to be the ignition coils, and then right underneath, the spark plugs. The reason that I'm cautioning you against this is because, especially on older models like the M113 and M112 that Mercedes put in pretty much everything, those engines being twin spark, using 2 spark plugs per cylinder, means if you're going to just kind of throw spark plugs at the issue and hopefully fix it, you can end up spending a ton of money not resolving the problem. So course of action, if you do think it may be a spark plug related issue, is going to be scan the car for codes. If you're getting a misfire code, that's a pretty good indicator that you may actually want to pay attention to your spark plugs. If you are getting an ignition coil based code, if you can swap them around depending on your model, that may be applicable. Swap one to another cylinder and see if the misfire transitions to that next cylinder. If it does, you may have a bad coil. If not, you may want to replace your plugs and go from there. Of course, on our M272 V6, we have 1, 2, and 3 ignition coils on this side of the cylinder head. If you want any assistance kind of figuring out when to replace spark plugs and ignition coils, or also how to do it, we of course have a ton of different DIYs on our YouTube channel that you can find for this engine and a whole bunch of other Mercedes engines. A lot of those will kind of coach you through the process of diagnostic as well as replacement. So another really common cause of idle vibration is actually a really cheap fix or sometimes a free fix, and that's going to be relating to the air filter housing right here. So if you look right around this kind of mesh screen, we have a seal. And what this is meant to do is lock on top of the mass airflow sensor, create a clean seal as air is coming through the intake pipes, through the air filter, and down into the engine. A lot of the time what can happen is if you have a bad seal on the MAF, or if the seal isn't properly seated on top of the MAF, causing a bad seal, the car will get a bit of a weird idle just sitting at traffic lights and kind of a weird vibration. And a lot of the time you'll notice when you first set out from a stop, you feel like you're driving with reduced power. A really easy way to check, because these can be a little bit tricky to get on top of the MAF whenever you have this cover off. The way I like to do it anyways, you just make sure as you're placing things down, you just kind of loosely place everything on top of the mass airflow sensor. We're going to get ours situated here. And then once everything is in place of where you'd want it, I like to put a hand on the edge of that seal. I don't know if you can see my finger in here, but what I do is once I can feel the lip of this seal, I'll gently press down and kind of guide it onto the mass airflow sensor itself. So then when I feel it sink down, I can feel around the edge of that seal and feel that it's seated flush with the lip of the mass airflow sensor. So for that one, specifically the mass airflow sensor seal, it's going to apply to a ton of different engines. It's really anything that uses one of these big engine covers / air filter housings. So that's M112, M113, M272, M273, some of the M278s, a whole bunch of different cars. Basically, if you have a housing that comes off and goes to a single throttle body, that seal around it is one that you're going to want to pay attention to. Usually the actual O-ring itself isn't bad. It can happen. It's happened to me in the past. A lot of the time it's just that it's not situated properly atop of the mass airflow sensor. So generally, the vast majority of the time, if you're having this idle vibration, the cause is going to be right here, and right back here in the form of your engine mounts and your transmission mount. A lot of the time, this will get misdiagnosed as a misfire or something because of the fact that it sort of feels like it's coming and going, when in reality, what you're feeling when you're getting that vibration, especially at low speed or even stationary, is the hydraulic mount having failed is now resting on top of the cross member, and you're getting a vibration in the car as the engine's vibration works through the metal of the cross member and kind of transmits all the way through the front end of the car. The vast majority of Mercedes use a hydraulic engine mount in which the base is metal and then the top part is rubber and has hydraulic fluid on the inside. When these begin to fail, or they've failed completely, all of the fluid will kind of spew out, the whole thing will collapse, and then you'll get metal-to-metal contact. So a lot of the time what you'll want to do is inspect these visually, see if you can see any signs of cracking, failure, or even leaking hydraulic fluid. When they fail drastically, they'll usually separate, and you can see that it's really collapsed and sitting on top of your cross member. But a lot of the time, if you're getting a vibration, if you haven't done motor mounts in a long time, especially on V8 models because they generate a lot more lateral motion, you're going to want to start with engine mounts. So that's going to cover pretty much all of the causes for vibration on this specific vehicle, but it doesn't mean it's kind of the end of where you might want to start searching. On some different Mercedes models, you're going to have a couple things you want to pay attention to. One really standard one is if you have an automatic transmission, you're going to want to make sure that your fluid and filter are up to date, and also that you don't have any shift solenoid related codes. A lot of the time, if you're getting a vibration kind of just sitting stationary or the revs are fluctuating a little bit, it could be something like your filter and your fluid are just a little bit dirtier than the transmission would like and it's kind of adjusting variably, or your torque converter clutch lockup solenoid, specifically on 722.6 models, is starting to fail or has aged. Those are going to require a little bit more maintenance. We do, of course, have a 722.6 service video, which will cover both of those for you, but that is one you're going to want to look out for. Additionally, moving outside of the transmission, if you have a 722.6 4MATIC model, and you have aftermarket axles, that can also cause an idle vibration and a low speed vibration. So that'll specifically be something like a W211E class with all-wheel drive, or even a C class like the one behind me with all-wheel drive. Very common thing that if you have an aftermarket axle in the front of the car, you're going to get these odd vibration characteristics. For that reason, we strongly recommend that if you are replacing your axles, you go genuine if possible. So that is going to conclude our list of best practices for diagnosing an idle vibration on your Mercedes-Benz. Of course, a really good starting point is always to get an OBD2 scanner and plug in, especially if you have a check engine light illuminated, as that can always point you in the direction of a smoking gun if you have something like a failing mass airflow sensor or a failing spark plug or ignition coil like we were talking about early on. If you like this video and you want more Mercedes-specific diagnostic content, we have that coming your way. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe below, and we'll see you in the next one.